Today, folks, we are going to be ranking the top 15 best goalie prospects. As you guys requested, we're going to be looking at the top tier goalies throughout the league, guys that could be the future of the NHL. And originally, I wanted to make this just a top 10 video, but there were so many good goalie prospects that I had to bite. I had to list 5 other guys. Sue me. But who are the best goalie prospects in the NHL today? How good could they be in the future for their respective teams? And does your team have any top goalie prospects? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we go through 15 all the way down to number 1. And hit that subscribe button if you're new. More hockey rankings, more hockey prospect talk, just like this all throughout the year. Now, we actually haven't made a goalie ranking video in a long time. Since 2019, 2020, I used to do them every single year, but the goalie prospect pipeline this year is just so enticing that I just wanted to talk about it. Now, I know I said I would make a top 15, but I bit as well on top of that. I had 2 other goaltenders that just missed this list that I just couldn't not give some appreciation to. For the first player that just missed the list, it actually comes from the Toronto Maple Leafs prospect pipeline, and it's actually Artur Akhtomov, who I've been a pretty big fan of, was drafted as an overager back in 2020, but has had a really interesting road since then. You can see in the KHL some pretty good numbers, a .921 save percentage, as well as VHL dominance in the regular season and the playoffs. For his age, you want to see that, but I love the mechanics of him. I love just how consistent he has been and could be a future backup potentially for Toronto. I also wanted to mention a big riser over the past couple of years in Thomas Zuccarello, who actually wasn't drafted but got signed by the Anaheim Ducks after playing so good that they just couldn't not sign him. You can see what he's done in the ECHL and the AHL at 20 years old, and with San Diego, .914 save percentage in 26 games. He's been really consistent, really solid after some great WHL production too, and he's just a guy that I believe a lot in. I don't think will be this amazing starter or anything, but could factor into Anaheim's future behind Lukas Dostal. But enough dilly-dallying, now let's get into the official top 15, the best guys in the future in the NHL. And next up, let's go to the Chicago Blackhawks prospect pool in Drew Commesso. Now, you could have Adam Guy on instead. Personally, for me, with how rough he was in the USHL, I'm not really sure about his future, but in Comesso's case, he's been a pretty consistent guy over the past few years. A second-round pick in 2020, and just continuing to get better and better, whether that be in the NCAA or in the AHL this year as a full pro this season. He's just been a solid and consistent guy. I don't think he's someone that's going to overwhelm Chicago's net as a starter, but I could see him being a decent stopgap until he maybe get a more elite guy. We'll see what that ends up being, but I think Commesso will be an NHL player. And that consistency isn't hard to see with the way he skates, with how quick he is as a goalie. I think he could be really good and adaptable once he hits the NHL level. But now let's move on to number 14 and go into a goalie I'm a little bit lower on compared to most, but I still see as an NHL goalie, and that's Michael Hrabal of the Arizona Coyotes, though I guess of the Salt Lake City Coyotes. No matter what, he'll be a pretty solid goalie in the future with the size and pretty strong skating for his frame. I think there's a lot of potential in that category. The only thing that kind of concerns me is kind of the clunkiness in his game and sometimes a little bit of that agility, getting up off a butterfly, getting in front of the net, trying to attack opposition. You can see this year, in his first year in the NCAA, not the worst numbers in the world, a .912 save percentage in 30 games for UMass, but was kind of just forgettable for Czechia in the World Juniors at points, though kind of pulled it together later in the tournament. I think Hrabal will still be a solid NHL guy, though again, with some of the clunkiness with his fundamentals, we'll see how much he's able to push as a great starter in the future. Now we're going to get into number 13 and the rest of the rankings in a second, but first let's talk about today's sponsor in BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer, a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
With the NHL NBA playoffs starting with the MLB season underway, there is no better time to start with BetUS. And of course, there's so many different options. You can go through the NHL games. You can go and make predictions on who will make the playoffs in the East. We ended up predicting the Penguins last time, and it's looking pretty good there. You can also make picks on the Stanley Cup winner. You can even, and this is the amount of options that BetUS gives you, you can even make picks on the England Elite League. That just shows you how many options there are out. And of course, with 24/7 customer service, 24/7 payouts, BetUS is the place to play in both the US and Canada as well. And if you guys send me your account on Twitter, you'll get $25 in free money on BetUS. One heck of a deal there. And thank you so much to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into the goalie business, and next up at number 13, let's go on to Spencer Knight, who has kind of fluctuated quite a bit in the goaltending prospect rankings. He's a guy that's played pretty well though, but as you can see, as a former 13th overall pick by Florida, he's somebody that I would say the expectations were pretty high for and hasn't quite met them yet, but I still think has a lot of time to meet those goals. You can see what he was able to do really in his first year in the NHL, a .908 save percentage in a backup role, not too bad. Since then, he hasn't really been able to find his game as consistently, but this year has a .906 save percentage in 43 games with Charlotte, and looking pretty good there. The thing with me with Knight is that even though he has some good technical skills, it seems like adapting to the pro shot, the pro opposition, and staying consistent in games has been a bit of an adjustment, but I still think there's a lot of time with the skills that he has to become a starter at the next level. And even though it seems like patience is needed, do not give up on Spencer Knight because he's still just 22 years old. He will be okay. Next up, we move on to number 12 and go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins side of things. And I actually got Joel Blomqvist, who was a second rounder back in 2020 and has progressed pretty consistently since then. I thought it's just become a solid, really under the radar goalie, and really he's just gotten better in every single league. You can see since he was drafted in 2020, just continuing to play well, getting some Liga starts here and there, really was a brilliant Liga starter back in 2022, getting a .940 save percentage. Then you could see it continuing to play well, and then this year, really establishing himself at the AHL level, a 2.12 goals against average and a .921 save percentage. He's been fantastic at the AHL level, and you combine that with the smarts he has, the fantastic frame that he uses excellently, and Blomqvist I could see being a solid guy behind Jari in the future for Pittsburgh, and being stable in that, which is something that Pittsburgh couldn't need. And hey, you get that at 52nd overall, and that's a pretty fantastic pick for the Pens. Now moving on, we actually go from Finnish goalie to Finnish goalie, and it's looking pretty good in that department. Next up at number 11, the player just outside the top 10, I have Nicholas Kakko of the Seattle Kraken, another second rounder, and back in 2022 this time around, but you can see at 6'4", 190 pounds, this guy is an absolute tank. There are times where I do think he maybe plays a little bit smaller than he should, times where he doesn't look as intimidating as he should, but he is a very composed, very reliable goaltender consistently, and you can see what he's been able to do this year in the Liga, just some pretty solid numbers, and with the Pelicans, a .926 save percentage, a 1.49 goals against average, and yeah, was his World Juniors great? Not exactly, but you can see what he's been able to do in regular season play in this big sample. And you also combine that with the playoffs too, a .931 save percentage in the Liga at 20 years old. That's impressive stuff. But now let's officially get started with the top 10 best goalie prospects, the future of goaltending in the NHL. And simply starting out the top 10, I think this is the most underrated goalie prospect in the NHL, not just with where he was drafted, but just the attention he gets, because he is way better than the attention he gets. And next up, I have Carl Lindbaum of the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, not a lot of you have probably heard of him because he was a 7th round pick back in 2021, but just like a Premu or a Devon Levi in the past, that does not define you. You see at 20 years old and the progression that we have seen after he was drafted, he had a .930 save percentage in the Allsvenskan just a year later. And you can see this year in the SHL, a .911 save percentage, a 2.12 goals against average, and pretty solid in the playoffs as well. Even though I think there are still some inconsistencies with his rebound control, he has great reflexes and skates the way you want a smaller goaltender to skate. And he's a guy that is super quick, super agile, and even though he is on the smaller side of things, I could absolutely see the potential of being booming for Vegas and getting a sneaky goaltender of the future in the 7th round. And I know what you're thinking, it just had to be Vegas, didn't it? Well, yeah. Now we're going to move on to number 9 and go on to another Finnish goalie on this list. Pretty well represented so far, but for very good reason. They have some great players of the future. And coming up at number 9, we're going to a player that I kind of went up and down in my opinion of a lot in Justus Annunen. He was a guy that I saw as one of the elite goalie prospects in the NHL just a couple of years ago. You could see back in 2020 what he was able to do in the Liga, a .929 save percentage, a .916 save percentage in the World Juniors as well. Just a fantastic year for him. But he kind of toiled away afterwards, having some subpar seasons in the AHL, the Liga, until really the last couple of seasons. A .916 save percentage in the AHL last year, and coming into this year, pretty solid numbers, especially at the NHL level for the Avs. It seems like he's finally figured it out, getting a .931 save percentage, a 2.24 goals against average, and his goal save above expected has also been brilliant. It's not a fluke. He has been amazing and has almost played himself into a position to be Colorado's playoff starter, or at least I think he should be. He's always had the size and the talent to do it, but the inconsistencies were there. But so far, he's looking like the starter of the future that Colorado thought he could be a couple of years back, and that is awesome to see. Now, this next spot is pretty fascinating. We're actually going to move on to the smallest goaltender on this list, but it's just hard to have him any lower considering everything that he has shown so far. Coming in at number 8, we're going to go to the Columbus Blue Jackets and Sergei Ivanov. And wow, I mean, it is crazy to look at a 5'11", 165-pound goalie and see just how insane he is. I mean, you look at what he's done since he was drafted, being a 5th-round pick in 2022. In 2023, being established at the VHL level, playing pretty well. But this year is where he has fully turned it on. You can see at the KHL level, in 33 games, not a small sample size, he has a .928 save percentage with Admiral. He had a .957 save percentage in 3 games with SKA. An absolutely insane campaign for a goalie that young, but also with the frame he has. But it's because of the athleticness, it's because of the smarts that he has. I don't know if he will be on a Uzi Saros type of level, but this could be one of these shorter than 6 feet goaltenders that somehow leaks into the NHL because of their insane skill set, and I would love to see it. Now we move on to number 7 and going on to one of the best fundamental goalies in the entire list, and that's Trey Augustine of the Detroit Red Wings. And number 41, it's a pretty solid pick, something that Detroit can definitely build on for the future, but Augustine to me was always one of the best fundamental goalies of that draft. And even though I did prefer somebody, which we will get into in a bit, Augustine was still looked at as a starter of the future for me. And you can see what he's been able to do in his first year of Michigan State. A great campaign, a .915 save percentage in 35 games. It was also really solid for the U.S. and the World Juniors too, but it's the composure, it's the technicality, it's always knowing where to be, his great play off the post. I mean, this is a guy that just knows the game extraordinarily well, and even though I don't think he has unbelievable talent necessarily, he's a guy that is just super smart, super composed, and I think that leads to just a lot of success and a lot of quiet play, but solid play throughout his career. Now, the only problem with calling Trey Augustine the definitive future of the Detroit Red Wings is that coming up at number 6, you got Sebastian Cossa right ahead. And you could have Augustine ahead, Cossa ahead. It could be a flip-flop either way for me. But especially considering how Cossa has adapted to the AHL level, that was a really big thing to see. Obviously, the size was an incredible thing, especially in his draft year. The way he was able to use it, the competitiveness that he has is pretty fiery. But he didn't really have the greatest results, and the consistency wasn't quite there. Until this year, really, where he's really started to get going in Grand Rapids. In 35 games, has a 2.47 goals against average, a .912 save percentage, and is starting to really figure it out versus that pro competition and a full pro season. And I think that is a big adjustment to make, but he has made it. And I could absolutely see him being this great goalie of the future. And that tandem of Cossa and Augustine could become one of the best in the NHL, if not the best. Now we move on inside the top 5, and we get to some of my favorites in the NHL. And a guy that I have loved for a long time here comes in number 5, and that's Dustin Wolf, who was a favorite of mine back in the 2019 draft. I think was my 3rd best goalie back then. Somehow found his way to the 7th round because of his size. At 6 foot, 174 pounds. Obviously, he's never going to be the biggest goaltender, but Wolf, in a lot of ways, has not let that hold him back. You can see just how good he has been throughout the AHL, the WHL, consistently throughout the years, just being an incredible goaltender. The big thing for me is if he hits a wall at the NHL level, if that size comes back to bite him. We know how aggressive he plays, how athletic he can be, but there are points where I think that size could be a detriment. I don't think he is at the level of a Uzi Saros, perhaps, where he's able to make up for it completely. And I think in Wolf's case, there has been a big adjustment of the NHL level. You can see an 96 save percentage. It hasn't been easy for him, but I do think we will see him make that adjustment eventually and become a solid starter of the future for Calgary, and hopefully a guy that can bring some stability. Though with the way he plays, his game is going to be a little bit less than stable. It's going to be chaotic, but in a fun way. Now, you knew I was going to talk about this guy. You knew I was going to mention this guy. You know I was going to gush over this guy because that's what I do. At number 4, let's go on to Jacob Fowler of the Montreal Canadiens. And in the top 25 prospects video, I had actually Wolf as an honorable mention and Jacob Fowler not. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, if I'm so much on board with Jacob Fowler, why don't I just put him higher on that type of list, on this list? And he finds himself at number 4. You guys obviously know I love Jacob Fowler. We made a whole friggin' video about him, but he just continues to get better. Shut out the friggin' Michigan Wolverines in the semifinals. That's what playoff Fowler does, baby. He's just insane, and I love him. For more detailed analysis, you can obviously go watch that video, but I love the competitiveness. I love the absolute skill that he provides to the game, and once he gets a little more stronger and gets a little bit more pounds in this pure muscle, he is going to be a beast for Montreal and a starter of the future. Now, we've already entered the elite tier of goalie prospects, but we're getting into the really good cream of the crop here. Next up at number 3, I'm going to go with Yaroslav Askarov of the Nashville Predators, and it's been a good progression for him. He was a guy that I loved in his draft year with the absolute electricity that he played the game. He was just so athletic, so rangy, and it was so much fun to watch, and since then he's played pretty well, and you can see him entering the Nashville Predators system. This year, he's just gotten better and better. A .914 save percentage in 40 games in the Preds Milwaukee AHL team, and he's been pretty great down there. He's a player, though, that I think is fascinating with the talent. The pure talent he provides is just insane, and even though I think there is maybe a lack of fundamentals compared to some of the best goalie prospects here, I do think he just makes it work with the electricity, with the wherewithal that he has, and I think it has gotten better at the pro level, that those adjustments, those fundamentals, and I think that will aid Nashville in the future. Though, with how good Saros is, who knows when Askarov will actually get that starter spot. Now we move on to number 2, and you could probably go by process of elimination on these last two guys, but coming at the second spot, I got Devon Levi of the Buffalo Sabres. And here's the thing, even though I didn't think he would have the greatest year this year in the NHL level, that didn't mean that I didn't think he was a good NHL prospect, as you could probably tell. I think he'll be great still for Buffalo in the future, and this next year could be good enough to take that full starter position. You can see this year hasn't been the greatest. It started off really rough at the NHL level, but he has gotten better, and you can see what he's been able to do with Rochester this year in his full pro campaign. A .929 save percentage in 21 games. That's pretty special to see, and even though you want to see that with his age, he's still a player that is looking exceptional, and the progress that we've seen since his draft year has just been awesome. He has come a long way. Coming in at number 1, this should be no surprise to anybody that has watched this channel, that has been on this channel for a long time, because you know that this is my boy and will always be my boy. If we're talking about a goaltender that has the best mix of strength, of size, of athleticness, of just pure skill and composure, to me, at number 1, it has to be Jesper Wallstedt. And it always has been Jesper Wallstedt. It always will be Jesper Wallstedt. Coming in at number 1, he just continues to be my man. And even though this year hasn't been the most insane thing by any means, I still think we have seen progression in ways. And to me, you also have the last game in the NHL being a shutout, and hopefully he'll start to find himself in these last few games of Minnesota. But to me, in terms of everything about him, he just has so much to give with his composure, with the calmness he puts in the game. And even though I think he's gotten pretty unlucky this year in a lot of ways, I think Wallstedt is still the future of Minnesota's goaltending, and as soon as next year could be a massive part of it. I hope he is. But those are my top 15, top 17 goalie prospects in the NHL, and I would love to know your thoughts down below. Would love to know what you guys agree and disagree with, because a lot went into this rankings, and I hope you guys did enjoy, but of course, you guys could have your own opinions. I'd love to know your rankings down below as well, what your top 5 might look like too. Of course, make sure that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you guys enjoyed today's video, and want to see more ranking videos just like it as well. And of course, make sure you share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, all the goalie prospect fans you guys know online, I guess. Anybody you guys know, share it out to them, and also click on this card for all my hockey prospects talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. I hope you have a fantastic hockey day, and I will see you in the next one, y'all. Goodbye.